Welcome, everybody. Mark Drumheller here with Dave Gleckner live for our college football breakdown, the culmination of the entire season down to one game, two teams squaring off for the national championship, the Georgia Bulldogs and the TCU Horned Frogs. Dave, we got an incredible matchup here. It's bittersweet in a way because the season coming to an end, but I think it's really going to be fascinating to see these two teams go head to head. TCU's touches such a tremendous story, especially from a betting perspective. Just have been massive. Pulling money in for their backers every week of the season. It felt like, and now here they are with their biggest test of the season.
I know it's crazy. This is probably what college football has wanted for quite some time. You know, when they tried to force the narrative with Cincinnati last year, and look, I thought Cincy should be there. We talked about it. They didn't get what they ultimately wanted. TCU, while they're not, one of those smaller schools, they were picked 7th in the conference. I mean, this is one of those meteoric rises. What were they? Plus like 1,000 to win the national title. They were just
120 to 1 for the season.
120. I'm sorry. Yeah. And just like the craziest odds. And here they are against a blue blood, someone who's looking to repeat on the national level for the first time since they unveiled the national playoffs, the national football playoffs. It's good. It's good for football. It's good for fans. And I'm hoping it's good game tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes it so fascinating, I feel like, is every year when the college football playoffs kind of start, we talk about, the teams that, we don't want the same teams in there, right? We got fatigue. We want new faces. But then every time we let a new face in, whether it's Michigan State, whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Notre Dame, they get mopped. They get mopped. And then, everyone's like, well, you got to put the best teams in there. That's why you have to put them in there. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And I think that TCU's done a great job of proving those people wrong, right? That like a team could come from a smaller program and actually compete with these guys on the biggest stage. The win against Michigan, I thought, was just massive, just for the college football playoff outlook in general. But they got their work cut out for them tonight. 13-point underdogs against the Georgia Bulldogs. Again, looking to repeat as national champions, 14-0 this season, and really have answered the challenge every step of the way. Every time Michigan has had a big game, they've dominated, right? You can look at week 1 against Oregon, 49-3. The big game against Tennessee, final score is a little bit close, but it was like 24-0 at halftime, right? And then you get into the SEC championship, they put up 50 on LSU, and then, biggest test of the year last week in the semifinal, they put up 42 against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think they've answered every single bell, and it's crazy to think that we're watching a kid in Stetson Bennett go back-to-back, and he's going to be up there, potentially go back-to-back, and he's going to be up there with some of the best that we've ever seen just based upon these performances. They've done it on the shoulders of him and a great defense. You can't say that, Bennett hasn't had something to do with this. He absolutely has, and he's been fantastic all along the way. When we doubted him last year, he's come back and doubled down his bet, and he's won it again this year. He looks great, and it's just such a really, really cool story watching, Stetson Bennett lead this ultimately great roster. And to think Kirby Smart, right? What did we think about Kirby Smart before last year? A guy that came up small in big games, and now he's got a chance to be a head coach of a back-to-back national championship. It's a great, great story from Georgia's perspective as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, finally getting away from the shadow of Nick Saban, right? And now, Georgia's kind of turned into that elite program in the SEC. But before we get started, guys, anybody watching, any questions, hit us up in the comments. Make sure you hit the like button there. Take care of the good people at the Sharp app. And again, if you haven't downloaded the Sharp app yet, you can still download it. The links are in the description below. Join our Discord. You can go get all those links, right here in the YouTube description. And, join the party. We're going to be in there sweating this game out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of bets are flying around, sides, totals, props, you name it. We got it. And, it's Sharp app. You can get, use of their AI prediction model. I was kind of looking at their predictions a little bit earlier today. Really fascinating stuff. This is a big, big spread, Dave. We're looking at 13 points in a national championship game, but there's been a history of blowouts in these types of games as well. So let's get started. Let's handicap this, guys, as we get going. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. We only got one game to break down. We might hit a little, NFL early looks on the way out, but one game to break down. So anything you guys want to know, just let us know in the comments for sure. But we're looking at Georgia laying 13 points, Dave, against TCU, and a total 63 and a half. You might be able to find some, 13 and a halves out there if you like the TCU side. I'll get started with this handicap, and I think, the biggest thing with Georgia is they're not the Georgia team from last year, right? And I say that in a sense of last year it was the dominating defense that kind of brought them home. And I think this year they're built a little bit different. And I think sometimes we look at Georgia's defense and how it's been a little bit vulnerable to big plays, something TCU does very well. And we say, oh, they're not the same as they were last year. But the offense, much, much better than what we've seen last year. This is one of the most efficient offenses in the country. Down the down, they're very good. In the red zone, they are nails, turning 94.7% of the red zone trips into points. And I think all that's going to factor in here because when we look at what happened last week, Dave, TCU got out to the big lead against Michigan, was able to hold on for dear life, and get that win. And it was an awesome win for the Horned Frogs, right? And on the other side, we had Georgia, got down big, had the battle back against Ohio State. I don't think Georgia's going to let that happen again here. And I think that that's really TCU's only viable path to victory is if they get out to a big lead. I feel like if they get down early in this game, they're going to be in a lot of trouble because Georgia's going to be able to kind of pin their ears back on defense and really give Max Duggan a lot of problems. But I think this game is going to be won on the offensive end. And that's why my two favorite plays in this one are Georgia laying the points. I laid 12 and a half. I would lay 13 and also taking the Georgia team total over 37 and a half.
Yeah, so, I think they're good picks, solid picks, and really where you're looking at how the game script goes is definitely a possibility of happening. Let's just start off with the obvious, the big number, right? We've only seen this type of number twice in national championship games in recent history. And both times when dogs were, of double-digit flavor going to the national championship game, they won outright. You go back to Oklahoma against Florida State, and then we also talked about Ohio State in that epic overtime game against Miami. But there was a difference then. And the difference was this wasn't a playoff, scenario. And you just lined up teams that had this long break, 4 or 5 weeks before playing the national championship game. And that was it. And I do think the playoff type of scenario kind of changes that factor of looking at, the outrights and the big dogs winning. And I just sit here and I tried to go so many different ways how I could see this game laying out and going. And to me, in the end, TCU had 2 pick sixes last week against Michigan. And they also ran, a low kind of cross route that turned into a 76-yard touchdown with Quentin Johnson. That's 21 points that you probably wouldn't have seen and definitely wouldn't have seen against a Georgia team on a normal circumstance. Then there's the other factor. I do think Michigan might have been slightly overrated. Now, I'm sure people won't love hearing that up in Ann Arbor, but the fact of the matter is they beat one team all year, and that was Ohio State. Kudos to them. They belong there. But when they got up into a close game, their only other real close game was Illinois, and they barely squeezed that one out. So, they got pressed, and McCarthy got pressed. I think we saw the national championship game the other week. We were lucky enough to see Georgia, Ohio State, and even TCU, Michigan. On a weekend of blowouts, we got 2 great games. Those games are typically blowouts. This week, I think we end up with the blowout. I do like Georgia in this game. I think they're going to be able to keep Max Duggan in the pocket, and even if he gets some rushing yards, I don't think he can beat them with his arm. Teams that actually move the ball a little bit against Georgia. Obviously, we saw it last week. Saw it the week before with Jaden Daniels. I know it was a big lead that they let come back, but, he had almost 500 yards passing. So we've seen teams be able to throw it against them. That's where I don't think Dugan can do it. He's going to have to rely on deep balls, and it's just not there for me. I think Georgia gets out early and holds them off with a stiff arm, wins, and covers the spread.
Yeah, that's what I think is key. Like, it's almost like TCU needs both games, this game, to occur the exact way it occurred for them last week in order to remain competitive. And they need Georgia to behave the exact same way it did last week and fall behind early. And I just think that's a lot to ask. Like, again, we talked about Georgia and their offense, how efficient they are. they're really going to be able the TCU in that 3-3-5. They really kind of put them in it's almost like a pick your poison situation,
Yeah.
right? Because they're going to eventually have to. I think they can bully them up front to where they have to bring down those safeties. But the issue is those linebackers are conflicted as far as, are they going to deal with these tight ends? Darnell Washington looks like he's going to be playing. Brock Bowers is going to be in there. They got to take care of those tight ends in the seam. They got to, stop the run. I just feel like it's a lot to ask for the TCU defense. So I do think that, maybe they can make adjustments in the halftime. TCU has been a second half team the majority of the season. They average more second half points than they do in the first half. Georgia, the opposite. Georgia's been more of a front runner. They get out the big lead. They sit on it. They grind you down to nothing. And I think that just kind of speaks to Georgia getting out to a lead here. I think their offense will be able to move the ball pretty easily on TCU. When, TCU let up, again, 45 points to Michigan, 528 yards. It wasn't like a fluke that Michigan got in the 40s against this team. And Georgia's gotten into the 40s in every big game against Tennessee where they took their foot off the gas at halftime, because they could, and that's really – so I think they're going to come out and they're going to score early while TCU is going to have to make some adjustments on defense after a few drives. And then I just think it's going to be tough for TCU to kind of battle back. Like Michigan last week, Dave, like we talked about them, they came out very conservative, ran the ball in between the 20s, and then got cute and crazy in the red zone and really got to really sabotage their own chances of getting out on a big lead against TCU. I don't think we see that here from Georgia. I think Georgia can, kind of mix in the run game, but I think Stetson Bennett's going to be whipping it around early, and they're going to get out to, a big lead. And I just don't see TCU offensively having a lot of success playing from behind like that against a Georgia defense that can kind of like pin their ears back, once they get a lead and kind of use that pass rush. One of the key stats Tailgate 10 had put out today, I thought it was tremendous. Georgia's one of the best teams at protecting the quarterback, and TCU does not get pressure at all outside of the top 100 in pressure rate. So Bennett's going to be throwing from a clean pocket. More things that lean to Georgia scoring a ton of points, Georgia offense being successful, especially early in this game while TCU adjusts. And I just think it's going to be too big of a mountain for TCU to climb.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, look at TCU. They got outgained by teams like Baylor, let up 500 yards to Baylor. They let up, you already, talked about the big number to Michigan. They've had to do a lot to get to this point, and it's so magical, so great that do they have one more trick in them? Yes, possibly, but it's got to go everything, like you said, their way as it has all season long. And I just think when Georgia has been asked to wake up and answer the bell, they answer it with a large ringing sound. And
emphatically, they answer it.
They knew week one, and they didn't stop. I remember, we were wrong. We were on the Oregon side that day. And they just said, you know what? We're not going to stop. And they kept going. And they did similar in some other big games, like you said, this year. Tennessee, they said, oh, that offense? Really? Shut them down for 3.5 quarters. Just shut it down. So they can win it so many different ways where TCU really has to, rely on turnovers and rely on the Max Duggan all the way. And I just think Georgia will have the answers. I'm cheering for the Horned Frogs. I really am.
Of course. It'll be the greatest story in college football history if they win tonight. I mean, I'll lose my money and be fine with it, to be honest. I mean, I don't like losing bets, but, I'll tip my cap and kind of move on. But,
go ahead.
When we're looking at this.
Yeah, you go.
Go ahead. All right. When looking at the spread, I think the biggest concern is 13 is a lot of points for this type of game. TCU has been resilient, relentless, has not gone away. And that was something that I took into consideration. There is a chance that TCU can come back and backdoor this thing, right? We saw Georgia blow out LSU, and then they just kind of let them score a bunch of points in the second half. I think we might see a similar thing like that here, but I still don't know if they'll get close enough. Anything under 14, I think is good here. But I do think TCU gets explosive plays, and Georgia's defense is vulnerable there. So I think that we could see TCU get some points on the back end of this game in the second half, once it's out of reach, which is why I also played the Georgia team total over, right? I laid the points. I played the Georgia team total over because I'm confident Georgia's going to do their end of the scoring. And maybe we do get some TCU, backdoor action. I don't know. I don't think they can get there, but I can understand that being concerned. I think anyone on TCU, it's probably going to be a backdoor thing. Like, I don't think they're going to be competitive in this thing from wire to wire.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think you're better off playing the team total of Georgia than you are the total game of 63.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I had to lean one way, these title games, I think 5 of the last 8 have gone over in these national title games.
Yeah,
so
I'd probably play over.
I would
probably
too,
play.
just because if you get a margin like Georgia we expect too early, the pace is going to be there, right? And TCU is going to want to try and catch up, and they're going to have to take some risks. Could pay off with big plays, could pay off with turnovers. So, I think I would lean over.
Yeah, I did play a little bit of over. TCU, like they're going to have to play with tempo, whether they're in front or the behind, because that's really the only way they can wear Georgia's pass rush out is if they get to the line of scrimmage, they're moving, they're playing with tempo, get those big, massive defensive linemen running around, running back to the line of scrimmage, getting down, getting up, getting down, boom, 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 tempo, tempo. They have to rely on that to slow down this Georgia pass rush because I don't think like man for man they can handle it, especially if Miller's not 100%. I don't know. Did we get word? Is Miller playing?
I got word that he's going to test it out, which I just think it's leaning towards playing.
Yeah, but he's awesome in pass protection. So like that's a slight downgrade there to DeMarcado if he's not able to play. But I think that's going to be TCU's thing. They're going to try and move with tempo. They're going to try and wear that Georgia defense out. But I think early in the game, it's just going to mean a lot of quick 3 and outs, right? A la Chip Kelly style. We're very familiar with Chip Kelly, but that fast offense works when you're gaining yards and chunk plays. But if it's not, then you're putting your defense back on the field pretty quickly. And I think that's what we're going to see early in the game. And I think Georgia's going to get out to a big lead in this one. But I would play the over. I did, play a little bit on the over myself in this one. I think we see I think if TCU's able to score, I think Georgia can get into the high 40s, 50s in this game. Like, I think their offense is that potent, and they have that big of an advantage over this TCU defense. And if they do that, getting to, over 63, 64 is going to be pretty simple. But I expect Georgia to end up in the 40s in this one, and it could be the high 40s, could be 50s if TCU, forces them to.
No, I only see it slightly different. I think TCU does come out rocking, playing loose, and I actually think they score a little bit in the first quarter, and then Georgia pretty much puts their dominance down, second, third quarter, and stretches this out with, a lead by about 3 touchdowns going into the fourth. But I do think TCU plays with some spirit and fight early. I just think that fight dies down pretty quick as we get towards halftime.
Yeah, I think so too. Another interesting bet. What are your thoughts on this? I saw I think it was BetMGM had halftime final money line, right? So you're parlaying on both Georgia minus 185. So you get Georgia's got to be winning at halftime. They got to win at the final minus 185. I didn't think that was a bad look either. I think when you look at, I expect Georgia to get out to an early lead in this one. Obviously, I expect them to win the game. Laying $1.85, isn't high on some people's priority list, but I think, it's probably better than the odds imply there.
No, I think that's good. You're like over 400 odds straight up for the money line. So, if Georgia's going to win, I think, we've seen it too much. You've seen the close game, then the blowout, or the blowout, then the close game. They had their close game. They had their scare. The dudes line up for a field goal at the, pretty much the drop of the ball for 2023, and he shanks it. That was it. That was their scare. I think they got away with it, and I just think, they're going to win. I think they'll win both sides, half and total.
Yeah, I think so. So we're both on Georgia. We're on the same page. Hopefully we bring home the money. TCU would be a great story if they got the victory, but I definitely think that's the play. Strongest position on the side. I have a small position on the total for the over. And again, I like Georgia's team total over. I think they're going to score a ton of points tonight. I think that offense doesn't get enough credit, but lots of fun. But before we get out of here, Dave, let's talk a little bit about the NFL wild card weekend coming around. We got 6 games to dissect. The lines are out. Some uncertainty with the quarterbacks. Is Tua going to be a go in Miami? Is Lamar going to be a go in Baltimore? Not really sure what to expect in those 2 games, but everything else seems to be pretty straightforward and set. Anything initially jump off the page at you when you looked at the lines for the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Chargers game jumped off the page at me a little bit. I think they opened around 3. It's been bet down to 1. And when I think
Mhm.
about it in, the grand totality of it, would I rather put my money on? Not the teams, the coaches. Brandon Staley versus Doug Peterson. And it's clearly Peterson. He's been there, done that. I mean, almost took the Eagles to 2 Super Bowls in a row. If it wasn't for Alshon Jeffrey fumbling a ball out of his hands, that would have got them the win at New Orleans. So I think he's an experienced coach. He'll have a game plan ready. They'll play the underdog role. Brandon Staley can't win any close games. So that one jumps out at me, and I can understand why it's been bet down. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jags end up favorites. The other one, I thought the Bills' Dolphins just seems a little large to me. I get Skylar. That's a lot of Skylar Thompson. That's almost telling me that's who's playing.
Yeah.
But, man, the Bills just don't do it with – they don't do it with confidence for me. I know they annihilated the Patriots last year in this round, but little big for me in my initial thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you guys got any questions with the NFL slate coming up, drop them in the comments. We haven't dove deep into it, but just going over some initial looks and what we see with the line. Giants getting 3 at Minnesota. Minnesota, again, the big fraud team in the second half. The market definitely was right in kind of fading them, down the stretch. Here they are again, a favorite laying 3 points to a Giants team. Yeah, Vikings beat them 27-24, I want to say, a few weeks back in Minnesota. I'm not sure where this line goes, but I think it's pretty on point here. Don't know if I want to lay points with Minnesota. I do think this is a spot. We always look for upsets in the first round. I think this is a spot where the Giants could win on the money line maybe and shock some people. Am I out of my mind or what?
You're not. And I mean, the Vikings had to pull it off with a 61-yard field goal at the end of regulation. So, I mean, it was a very tight game in the original game. For me, I haven't been the biggest Dable guy. I think he's been a little bit too much in the spotlight. But in the end, the way they performed yesterday against the Eagles, I give them a ton of credit. They fought hard the entire game. Davis Webb, all of them. And that comes off the coach's personality. When I see teams play to the coach's personality, it gives me a strong vote of confidence that they're going to be up and ready for this game. And don't forget, you got a rookie coach on the other sideline too. I would say Dable's a little more experienced with the Bills experience, the Patriots experience, and Alabama experience. I think they're going to be ready to rock and roll. So you're not off. You're not off at all. I don't think this line moves much. I think we're going to see New York money, but I think they're going to be scared to get this under 2.5 because that's when the sharps might jump in. So I think it stays pretty firm at 3.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this is might teeter a little bit, but you're going to get resistance. I think if it goes over 3.5, then Giants money is going to come in. If it goes under 3, then Vikings money is going to come in. So might be a little bit back and forth. You can snatch a good number if you got your eye out on the board, but it'll probably settle around 3, I would think, in this one. But I think the Giants are one of those underdogs that kind of has a shot as well. Anything else jump out to you? Tampa,
Cowboys.
Dallas,
Cowboys. Yeah.
Bucks,
So
Cowboys.
It's interesting. Brady 7-0 all time against Dallas. Never been an underdog to them. Will be an underdog going into this. I think he's 7-3 or something like that. ATS in the playoffs as a dog, which sounds like a lot, but we 10 games of Brady like that. But they've seemed to kind of find a little something in these past few weeks. And obviously Dallas is going in on a very concerning note, the way they played to finish the season with the Commanders. It's a game really I could see either way, but I'm going to tell you, I think the Bucs are live in this game. I really, really do truly believe that Dak in these situations, Mike McCarthy in these situations has not overwhelmed or even shown any sign that you can be confident putting your money behind them. Remember last year, Dak let the clock run out instead of spiking, and he ran instead of getting his team lined up and being able to spike the ball to get one more chance to beat the Niners. They find interesting ways to let this thing unravel.
They do. They always let it get away from them. I feel like they always let it get away from them. I don't know if Tampa's strong enough to kind of do that here, but I do think, they are getting healthy on the offensive line, and they've been one of the worst running teams in the NFL this year. They've been the worst team against the spread. They have to be. I mean, they're like 4-12-1 against the spread this year. Just brutal, just bankrupting everybody that backs them. So it does make me a little queasy turning around and pushing my money in on a team like that is only covered 4 times this season. But listen, if they can run the ball and keep that pass rush off Brady, that's my biggest concern is Micah Parsons just being all over Tom Brady. If they can do that, I think they can have some success here, and they're supposed to be getting some people back on the offensive line. So I think that's going to be the key there. This is one to where I kind of lean Bucks right now. Don't know if it's just my Philadelphia bias and hating the Cowboys, but I want to see that injury report as the week progresses. So lots of good stuff for us to keep an eye on. We will be back, probably let's do it Sunday. If we can do it Sunday or Saturday, maybe we'll do something over the weekend. We'll get some NFL picks out there of what we're seeing. But we appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm Mark Drumheller here with Dave Gleckner. Make sure you guys download the Sharp app, get into Discord. We're going to be winning some money. Football season's not over. There is time to cash in, but good luck tonight with the national championship, and we'll see you guys on the weekend.